London, 1820. The chandeliers of Albemarle House spilled light like liquid fire across the marble floors, and beneath their glow the season's most desirable bachelor, Sebastian Vale, Duke of Ravenshire, moved through the glittering crowd with effortless grace. Everywhere he went, whispers followed about his fortune, his estate, his rumoured proposal to Lady Charlotte Fairborn, the dazzling belle of the season. Charlotte's laughter rang through the ballroom like crystal, and every glance she cast was a calculated invitation. It was said the Duke was already half ensnared. Yet behind the mask of courtship, Sebastian's eyes betrayed another story. For every time he bowed to Charlotte, they drifted, almost involuntarily, to her younger sister, standing quietly near the colonnade. Lady Eliza Fairborn was everything her sister was not. Modest, composed, her beauty a thing of still water rather than of flame. Where Charlotte sought attention, Eliza sought peace. Where Charlotte performed, Eliza observed, storing small truths in the secret chambers of her heart. She had long learned that invisibility was its own armor in society. But that night, as the Duke's gaze brushed hers across the dance floor, her heart betrayed her. She looked away too quickly, and in that single gesture he was lost. Sebastian had come to the Fairborn house weeks earlier, intending to secure a wife. His lineage demanded it, his title required heirs. Lady Fairborn, widowed and ambitious, presented her elder daughter with the enthusiasm of a general unveiling a prized regiment. Charlotte was charming, witty, and perfectly aware of her own effect. The match would have pleased everyone except the Duke himself. What had first been strategy had become torment, for the woman he wished to speak to was never the one beside him. It began with a letter sealed in crimson wax, slipped beneath the Fairborn household door one misty morning. Eliza had been the first to see it, her hands trembling as she picked it up from the marble floor. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, precise, and far too familiar. She hesitated only a moment before taking it to her room instead of her sister's. The seal broke with a soft crack, releasing a faint scent of ink and roses. "My dearest lady," it began. "I saw you last night by the window, and for a moment I feared the world might discover how you haunt me. I danced, I laughed, I smiled, and yet none of it felt real until I found your eyes again. There are words I cannot speak beneath the scrutiny of chandeliers, but they spill easily in ink. If this is madness, then let me be mad for the rest of my days." Eliza's breath caught as she read. Each word pulsed like a forbidden prayer. She told herself the Duke must mean Charlotte. It was only natural. But the phrases struck too deep, too specific. The detail of her shawl, the mention of her reading habits, the quiet remark about her love for evening walks. None of these things were Charlotte's. They were hers. She told herself she must not reply. She told herself 10 times. Then she reached for her pen. "My lord," she wrote, "it is dangerous to write such words. The world may be blind, but it is never deaf. Some truths are best whispered to paper and burned before dawn." The next day, another letter came, and another after that. Soon the quiet hours between dusk and dawn were filled with the soft scratch of quills and the hiss of candlelight. Sebastian's words were the confessions of a man caged by duty. Eliza's were the hesitant replies of a woman trapped by conscience. They wrote not as Duke and Lady, but as two souls sharing the same prison wall. He told her of his loneliness, of the expectations pressed upon him by title and blood. She told him of her longing to be seen beyond politeness, beyond name. Each letter built upon the last, weaving a fragile bridge between their worlds. And yet, each morning, Reality returned with cruel precision. In daylight, he was the Duke of Ravenshire, public, flawless, desired by all. At every dinner he sat beside Charlotte, speaking the words of courtship, while his heart beat elsewhere. He smiled at her, complimented her gowns, and endured her vanity. But every glance toward Eliza, quiet, distant Eliza, was agony and absolution at once. Charlotte noticed nothing, or perhaps she chose not to. Her interest in the Duke was practical, not passionate. A marriage to Ravenshire would restore her mother's fortune and elevate her beyond every rival. To her, love was a game of estates and invitations. She never once suspected that while she slept, her suitor wrote letters to her sister under the same roof. One evening, Eliza nearly broke the spell. The family had gathered for dinner. Laughter filled the candlelit room. The Duke, seated across the table, raised his glass to Charlotte, yet his gaze slid past her to Eliza. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. The warmth of the fire, the clinking of silverware, everything fell silent. He said softly, "You are fond of jasmine, are you not?" Charlotte laughed. "Me? Heavens no, I find the scent oppressive." Eliza froze, her fork trembling in her hand. Sebastian's eyes flickered, the briefest spark of recognition quickly extinguished. He turned back to his plate, his composure perfect. But the air between them crackled like static. That night, his letter arrived earlier than ever. "You see what dangers truth invites. Even a single word may betray us, and yet I cannot stop. You have become the pulse beneath my stillness, the silence between every breath. I would sooner burn my title than forget your name." Eliza pressed the letter to her lips, her tears smudging the ink. What they were doing was unforgivable. Yet when she wrote again, "Then let us remain shadows, my lord. If daylight would destroy us," she knew it was already too late. Their love, born in whispers, had become a storm, waiting for the first crack of thunder. The night of Lady Eleanor's grand engagement ball arrived like a storm disguised in silk. Every chandelier in Ashbourne Hall was lit, casting golden light upon marble floors, polished to a mirror sheen. The orchestra swelled with violins and harps, laughter rippled like champagne, and the scent of roses and power filled the air. Lady Eleanor, radiant in sapphire silk, glided through the crowd like the moon personified, beautiful, admired, untouchable. And yet in every corner, behind every polite bow and measured smile, eyes whispered of one thing: the Duke of Ravenshire. He stood tall and composed, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on Eleanor as if she were the sun itself. But to Clara, who watched from the edges of the ballroom, she saw the truth. He looked through her sister, not at her. It was not admiration, it was torment. And she knew that torment by heart. For weeks his letters had become her lifeline, words inked with fire and longing, confessions of sleepless nights, fears and dreams he could tell no one else. She had told herself it was a harmless friendship, an escape from the masks they both wore in society. But each word had drawn her deeper, and now she stood at the edge of a precipice, watching the man who wrote her soul's reflections pretend to adore another woman. It was a cruelty she hadn't prepared for. She moved through the glittering crowd, her simple ivory gown modest beside her sister's brilliance, yet her poise drew glances. A few noblemen bowed politely, but she hardly saw them. Her eyes found only one, Alexander, the Duke. When he caught her gaze across the ballroom, time stilled. The orchestra's melody blurred into silence. In that brief connection, the veneer cracked. His mask slipped, and in his eyes burned everything unsaid: regret, longing, desperation. Then he turned sharply away, bowing to Eleanor, taking her gloved hand for the opening waltz. Clara's chest constricted as the dance began. The two figures, her sister and the Duke, glided gracefully across the floor, the very picture of perfection. Applause swelled around them, but every spin, every dip, felt like a dagger twisting in Clara's ribs. When the Duke's hand brushed Eleanor's waist, his eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat, toward the edge of the crowd where Clara stood. She saw it, the guilt, the ache, the truth trying to claw free from the prison of duty. Unable to bear it, Clara fled. Through the gilded doors, down the candle-lit corridor, her slippers barely whispering against the carpet. She reached the old conservatory at the far end of the manor, a sanctuary of glass and moonlight. The garden beyond shimmered silver under the night sky. There, among the roses and ivy, she let the tears fall. The world beyond this glass seemed freer, honest, unmasked. Behind her, the door creaked. "Clara." His voice, soft, urgent, carried through the hush. She froze, every nerve alive with pain and hope. "Please, don't turn away." She did not move. "You shouldn't be here, Your Grace." "Alexander," he said, stepping closer, his tone pleading. "Say my name if nothing else." She turned slowly. The man before her looked nothing like the composed Duke from the ballroom. His bow tie hung loose, his expression raw. "You shouldn't have followed me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I had to. Every moment tonight was a lie I couldn't bear." Clara's laughter broke, brittle and heartbroken. "A lie? You call dancing with my sister a lie? Smiling at her, toasting her? You will marry her, Alexander. That is no lie." He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. "I will not," he said firmly. "Not when my heart already belongs elsewhere." "Do not say it," she warned, tears spilling again. "You will ruin us both." He reached into his coat and pulled a folded piece of parchment, her last letter, worn and creased. "It was already ruined the moment I wrote this," he said, voice breaking. "I cannot stand before your sister and pretend any longer. I cannot live in a lie that shames us all." Clara stared at the letter, her own words reflected back at her like a curse. "Then what do you intend to do?" His answer was quiet, but resolute. "Whatever it takes to make right what love has undone." Outside, thunder rolled, a storm building over Ashbourne. Inside, two hearts stood on the edge of scandal and truth, where love was both salvation and sin. The storm that raged outside seemed to find its echo within Ashbourne Hall. The engagement ball, once a spectacle of laughter and polished grace, had turned into a fragile illusion, trembling on the verge of collapse. The guests murmured, the orchestra faltered, and somewhere in the distance, the Earl and Countess whispered with furrowed brows. Yet at the heart of the tempest stood three souls bound by truth and betrayal. Clara had returned to the ballroom, her composure fragile, but her spirit steady. She could no longer run, not from the lies nor from the feelings that had already changed her life. The music had resumed, a waltz, slow and haunting, and the Duke of Ravenshire stood by the grand staircase, every inch of his noble bearing restored, yet his eyes fixed only on her. Eleanor noticed, she always noticed. "Why does he look at you so?" Eleanor's voice, sweet as honey and sharp as glass, cut through Clara's daze. "You have been avoiding him all night, sister." Clara swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "Because he looks at everyone the same way, Eleanor. You imagine too much." But Eleanor smiled, the smile of a woman who has always been admired, never doubted. "Do I? Then tell me why the Duke has not yet proposed, though father has arranged everything but the date. Tell me why he grows distant when I speak of love and duty." Her tone softened, eyes narrowing. "And tell me, Clara, why your hands shake when his name is spoken?" Clara said nothing. She could not. The truth hovered on her tongue, heavy as thunder. Across the ballroom, the Duke moved toward them, each step deliberate, the crowd parting in murmuring waves. His expression was grim, determined, a man marching toward his own ruin. When he reached the sisters, the orchestra stilled once more. Conversations died mid-whisper. "Your Grace," Eleanor said, her composure flawless, "you honor me again this evening?" "Lady Eleanor," he began, bowing slightly, but his gaze never left Clara. "It is not you I must speak to." The silence that followed was unbearable. The guests leaned closer, scenting scandal like wolves catching blood. Clara's breath caught. "Alexander, don't," she whispered, but he pressed on. "For too long I have hidden behind propriety, behind expectation," he said, voice steady but charged with emotion. "I let fear dictate what my heart already knew, but no longer." He turned toward Eleanor, who stood pale and trembling. "I have wronged you, my lady. You deserved truth, not performance. It is not your heart I hold in mine. It is your sister's." The room erupted, gasps, whispers, the clatter of fans snapping shut. Eleanor recoiled as if struck, her hand flying to her chest. "My sister!" she breathed, disbelief breaking into fury. "Clara!" Clara stepped forward, tears streaming freely now. "Eleanor, I never meant—" "Never meant?" Eleanor's voice rose, echoing across the ballroom. "You have humiliated me before half of London. Was my happiness so small a price for your secret affair?" The Duke stepped between them, his voice breaking with sincerity. "It was not deceit, but love. Love that began in letters when neither of us knew the other's heart could answer back. I thought I could silence it. I thought I could be the man the world expected me to be, but to deny her is to deny myself." The crowd hushed again. Even Eleanor, trembling with rage, faltered under the weight of his confession. Clara could barely breathe. Her world, their world, had shattered. And yet in the wreckage she saw something fierce and undeniable in his eyes. Truth. Eleanor's tears fell silently. "Then you have both doomed yourselves," she whispered, "and I wish you joy of it." With that she turned, her gown a storm of sapphire silk, and fled through the throng. The Duke exhaled, his shoulders sagging under the release of years of pretense. The ballroom buzzed anew, half in outrage, half in awe. Clara trembled as he took her hand gently. "You have lost everything," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Then I have gained what matters." Outside, lightning split the sky open, flooding the ballroom in white light. In its glow, their joined hands gleamed like defiance itself. Around them, judgment and whispers swirled, but for the first time, the Duke and the governess's sister stood unmasked, unafraid, and utterly free. The storm raged long into the night, but when dawn came, the gossip softened into legend. They said the Duke of Devonshire had thrown away fortune and favour for love. Others said he had simply found his soul. But those who saw them years later, walking the garden paths of his quiet country estate, hand in hand, knew the truth. Love, once written in secret ink, had finally been written in the light. Eliza tried to avoid him at first. A duke's attention could only bring ruin to a woman like her. She hid behind embroidery hoops and quiet errands, yet somehow he always found reason to linger nearby. A remark about the weather, a shared glance over tea, a question about a poem she had been reading. They never spoke long, but each moment left echoes. He saw in her a gentleness that soothed what years of duty had hardened. She saw in him a loneliness that no wealth could disguise. The letters began innocently enough. A misplaced note from the Duke thanking Lady Fairborn for a book recommendation meant for Charlotte, but clearly written by a man who had noticed what Charlotte never read. Eliza replied in her sister's stead, intending only to correct the misunderstanding. Yet his words had moved her, and her answer, though cautious, was warmer than it should have been. When his next letter arrived, the salutation was the same. "My dearest lady." So began a correspondence that neither could truly claim and neither could bear to end. In the ballroom, they played their parts flawlessly. Sebastian danced with Charlotte beneath the chandeliers while Eliza watched from the edges, her pulse quickening whenever he laughed. Every letter he wrote was another forbidden breath, every reply she penned a sin wrapped in ink. The secret bound them tighter than any vow. On one gilded evening, Charlotte cornered Eliza before the ball. "Do not linger near him tonight," she said sharply, while adjusting a diamond clasp. "People already speak of how much you blush whenever he enters the room. It will seem as though you envy me." Eliza bowed her head, swallowing the ache in her throat. "Of course, sister." Moments later, as the orchestra struck a waltz, the Duke appeared before Charlotte, offering his hand. Applause followed the couple as they glided onto the floor. To the onlookers, it was courtship incarnate, the perfect pair. Only Eliza knew that when he looked up from the dance's final turn, his eyes sought hers across the room, filled with words he could never speak aloud, and she, trembling, turned away, her heart burning with the knowledge that she was loved in secret and doomed in silence.